A decision on which city will host the 2024 Summer Olympics is still years away, but the idea of bringing the Games to Boston has already generated plenty of debate. Among those looking at the idea without taking sides is David D'Alessandro, the one-time CEO of John Hancock, the company that sponsored the 2002 Utah Olympics. David D'Alessandro doesn't have a dog in the fight. He's not part of the Boston Olympic Committee, and he hasn't signed on with the naysayers, which just might make him the perfect voice of reason.
There's a very good case, I think, to be made for either side, but we need to see the numbers, and we need to make a decision.
And for D'Alessandro, that decision comes down to a very simple question.
In the year 2025, when the Olympics have come and gone, is the city much better off because they were here? Is it the same or is it worse?
What would determine whether we're better off or worse off?
Well, for example, will we have buildings we can reuse? Forget the stadiums for a minute, because stadiums are demountable.
D'Alessandro says get creative. Instead of building one giant Olympic village, why not have multiple sites on a more manageable scale?
Why not build 4 of them in different districts? And when the Olympics leave town, maybe we have 4 new public schools. So we need to be innovative, because the people who are innovative will win the Olympics and have a better town because of it.
So the naysayers are harping on things like the white elephant structures, but also they're afraid that the city will be overrun in a way that we might get tacky kind of stuff.
It's quite possible, and some cities have done a terrible job. Atlanta did a terrible job, whereas Sydney did a great job. It's a question of what are the criteria, and can we meet them? And can our city have a better transportation system on a faster basis than we would have had we not done it?
One of Boston's concerns is vulnerability. The city is still reeling from the marathon bombings, its aftermath, and a new vigilance when it comes to security.
That's true, but you know, as Ed Davis would say, security is not a reason not to do something. And the Olympics are going to be held somewhere, and we are understandably a sensitive community, but we've had huge sporting events since then and big concerts, and it's just a question of having the diligence to be as secure as possible.
A number of venues have popped up as possibilities, including the Seaport District, Suffolk Downs in East Boston, even Fenway Park. But the Boston Olympic Committee has been mum on specifics.
Well, I think that they have to, at some point, be more transparent. But the decision on the actual Olympics coming here isn't made until 2017. So there is plenty of time to vet what people are proposing.
What has changed since you were so involved in the 2002 Salt Lake City Olympics?
I think what's changed a great deal is they've had 2 Olympics that have been in communist states, where a great deal of money in Sochi and in Beijing, a great deal of state money was spent. And the Olympic Committee is looking at that saying, we do not want to leave a legacy behind us of exactly what the detractors are talking about, which is unused stadiums, transportation systems that were overbuilt or in some cases even underbuilt.
All of this leads to the biggest issue of all, money. Who will pay for it and how much will fall on local taxpayers? Again, D'Alessandro thinks there's a way to make it work.
The operation of the game should be self-sustaining. The television rights are now in the billions. Whoever puts on the games will get about $1 billion, $1.5 billion from television. But the infrastructure cost, the Olympic Games pay nothing for the infrastructure cost. So that we need to build some transportation systems that we have to pay for. That is public money.
And with public budgets already stretched thin, D'Alessandro expects a vigorous debate.
I think the political winds are going to be great here. There will be some people who say, absolutely not, we can't afford it, it's going to detract from other things we're trying to do in our city and frankly in our region. But politically, I think the politicians will do what they normally do, and they'll put their finger up to the wind. That's what they do.
All right, so is the Hub ready to play host to the world? And what would a successful Summer Games do for Boston? Joining me now is Steve Pagliuca, co-owner of the Boston Celtics and an executive member of the Boston 2024 Organizing Committee. Welcome to you, Steve.
Hey, it's great to be here, Emily.
Thanks. Great. You're looking great. So you're looking Olympic. You're an Olympian yourself.
Getting ready. Long time, it's 2024.
We just learned today that Mayor Marty Walsh and a delegation is heading out to Colorado Springs to meet with other potential host cities from around the United States. They're going to look at, they're going to kind of get a feel for what it would mean to have an Olympics in a home city. What's that all about?
Well, this is a process. It started in 2013 with the government looking at the feasibility, and they came and said, look, we should keep studying the feasibility. And we've met the Olympic Committee, U.S. Olympic Committee, several times. They think Boston is a very viable city. We think it's viable. And the key, I think, as David said, is how do you get it privately financed? Mm-hmm. How do you make sure that it dovetails with the things the city's already doing? We're going to spend in the next 20 years a huge amount of infrastructure, I think in the tens of billions of dollars. How do you dovetail and turbocharge that and make it be kind of an accretive games to the city? We don't really want to really do it unless it's good for the city. It leaves a lasting positive legacy.
But where does that transportation money come from? I mean, I think that's the question we're struggling with right now. We can't upgrade. We have a very unsophisticated, partly because it's an antique city, but an unsophisticated transportation system. I mean, you're talking about billions.
Well, the legislature has already appropriated money to redo the transportation systems. And so our job is to look at that. We're building a detailed model of the entire city. There's a whole effort on by the committee with architects to build a very sophisticated model. And by the way,
big dig, gray do.
Let's say if we don't get the games, this will be very useful for the city. It'll be a leave behind by the organizing committee. And so we're building this model. It's going to dovetail in what the city's going to do anyway. So there won't be any dollars spent except for ones that it's going to do anyway. And you can add, as part of the budget we talked about, you can add buses and other things temporarily that don't cost a lot of money. You can rent them and therefore make it viable. But the whole point of the committee is it's got leaders from all over the Commonwealth on it to look at this in detail, to say, can we do it? We think we can. Is it feasible? Is it going to leave the city and the region a better place? That's the key issue.
So David D'Alessandro brought up a point that I think everybody has concerns about, and that is transparency about what the venues will be, where there will be development, whether there'll be a giant Olympic village or smaller ones like he had suggested. I know you're a ways away, but and the Globe did some digging and came up with some viable options there. But when might you sort of rule some of those ideas out?
Well, right now the plan is to look at everything, and it'll be very transparent as we study it. You need data and facts. The nice thing about Boston is we have all these university venues. We have a lot of things in place right here. Boston's being compared to places like San Francisco, places like Washington, D.C. We are a compact city. We do have land. We do have lots of universities and infrastructure and stadiums. So we're trying to put that all together and say, how can you do it in a very effective but reasonable cost way? So that'll start to become, as the plan develops, as we build the model, as we talk to the USOC about what the needs are, that'll be developed.
How is the committee itself being funded? Is it all private money from you and John Fish?
It's all private money from, it's been great. People have called up and donated money and said, I'd love to see the Olympics in Boston. As you know, we call ourselves Title Town, and people love sports here. And so there's really a lot of interest if we can do it in a responsible, sustainable, and accretive way.
When this idea first got floated, I mean, there were balloons popping all over the place. Everybody thought, this is a bust. No one's ever going to go along with this. But how did the idea sort of grab hold? How did you all come together and kind of figure this out?
Well, I think it started out with John Fish was involved with the legislature with a study to say, what is the feasibility? Could it be good for the region in Boston? I think the answer to that was, yes, it is feasible. And it's the Olympics and the Paralympics. It brings billions of dollars of economic viability to the region. It showcases Boston, so there's a lot of positives. And as people thought about that, with the caveat, everybody in the committee every day says, okay, it's got to be good for Boston, accretive. It can't cost us any extra public dollars, and we've got to leave it behind so it has a positive legacy for the city. We're all doing this for that reason alone. And we love sports.
Did you think about the Winter Olympics, since we're so close to, I mean, unlike Sochi, we really are close to a number of great mountains in Vermont, New Hampshire, all around us?
I don't think there was much discussion of that, and I think there's probably some specific issues on that in terms of lodging and venues and all those kinds of things. So the summer presents itself. We could be lucky for the United States as a whole. If we get the games, it hasn't been here in a while. So 2024, we might be in the right place in the right rotation. And I think, Boston has a lot to offer. People from all over the world come to Boston to study. They love the city. They love the layout. It could be a wonderful games here if we can do it in the right way. And we should look at every opportunity, maybe having 4 separate sections. building moderate and low-income housing as part of this as a leave behind. So I think it can have enormous positive effects if you do it in the right way, but it's got to be done thoughtfully. It's got to be done responsibly.
How do you assuage fears? It's one thing to have white elephant structures that are useless after the Olympics, but how do you assuage people's concerns about traffic, about security, about the enormity of this event that attracts millions, a couple million press people alone? I mean, how do you assuage that?
Well, they've been very successful in London. That's, as you know, I was just there last week. That's a very crowded city, more traffic, believe it or not, than in Boston.
Oh, I know that.
They pulled off a very successful games there. They did it in Barcelona. So there's no question this adds infrastructure, this adds traffic and busyness to the city. But that's why Boston's a great city. I think it can handle that. If it can't handle it, we won't have the games. But it's well laid out. It's compact. We've got all the infrastructure here that we think can handle it. Some people won't want that traffic. Some people don't like the traffic as it is today. But I think the benefits of having the games will outweigh the costs.
They can rent their homes to somebody who wants it.
Absolutely.
I mean, that actually is a serious way for people to make money.
Absolutely. And as Del Sandro said, the Olympic Committee is looking at this in a creative way. As they want it to be sustainable games. They want it to be, you can put infrastructure up that maybe temporary stadiums that can be taken down. The sites can be used for other reasons. You don't want to create white elephants. So everything will be done in the plan to minimize the kind of white elephant risk. It'll be privately financed, which then minimizes the risk of any public financing going in. It'll try to leverage and turbocharge the public financing that's already there for the infrastructure that we're doing anyway.
All right, Steve Pagliuca, we're looking forward to seeing a little bit more of the plan.
Very excited about working on it, and hopefully it's feasible and we can pull it off.
All right.